He was head of the German department, the language department at UVM for 50 years.
Your grandma?
Grandpa.
I could hear you. Ooh, that's good.
Okay, I think people can hear us now.
And do you need to promote the others? So that like Zoraya?
Yes, but I don't see. Okay, Christy says, so she can hear us, but says we're echoing a bit. Does anyone else, does everyone have their speakers off on your computers? Okay.
Speaker and microphone both have to be off?
Yes.
Yes, right?
Yeah, if they can hear, we'll just talk through this speaker here.
It'll pick it up, right? It picks it up at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a pretty good, I think Mike should be able to hear all of us talking. You're
Okay,
fine
Christy
now.
says we're fine now. Maybe I'm gonna promote Marcella
And Marcelo.
and see if she can talk to us and make sure we can hear her.
Samantha Dunn said we're good.
Okay. Marcella, can you unmute and talk to us so we can make sure we hear things on our end?
Yeah, hi, hello, good evening.
Thank
You can hear us all okay?
Are we good?
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's very good.
All right, I'm gonna move you back, Marcella, for now, and then I'll. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay,
Thank you for the sticking with us.
thank you all. It's a brave new world of technology here. How long ago we didn't have all of this. Oh, Soraya is joining us.
I got it.
So she, you gonna promote her as well?
Yep, I got it.
Perfect. Okay, we will get started. This is the CDNR committee meeting, 11:18. I'm Sarah Carpenter, Chair, and Councilor Joe McGee with us, and Councilor Soraya Hightower is zooming in. I would entertain a motion to approve an agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from 9:15.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So I don't know if there's folks on with public forum. We're gonna do that for a few minutes. We have invited our attorney lobbyist to join us around 5:15, so I stop that depending on what folks have to say. I guess we would, since there's no one here in the room, if any of you are wishing to make a public comment, could you raise your hand? Okay. Is Jamie Fian on? I told him 5:15, so we're ahead of ourselves. Brian, I don't know if you have any updates on Just Cause. We've invited, as I said, Jamie Fian, who works for the city of Burlington. He's an attorney and does the lobbying for the city, so he will be working on all of the charter changes. I've also asked Tom Proctor from RAD to update us on the Just Cause Coalition work that he's been working on. Do you have anything to add?
Nothing that would be close to as informed as what Tom and Jamie have. So I'd rather let them do it. I'd be winging it a little bit.
Okay. Is Tom on? Do you see Tom?
Tom's like, oh, he can do it.
Okay, so Tom, if you don't mind, maybe you could start and update us on your work and what's happening with the your coalition.
Sorry, you cut off a little bit there, Sarah. Do you mind just repeating that?
Well, we're gonna ask you to start off. We've invited Jamie Fian, who's the city's lobbyist, to join us at about 5:15, but if you could kind of start and let us know the work you're doing and RAD's doing on the coalition for Just Cause.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So this has been a major focus for RAD from the summer onwards. We had a little break after spring, after we obviously got the victory in the town hall meeting day 2021. We wanted to make sure that the will of the people in Burlington is going to be honoured by the State House, and we realised that there was probably a great deal of work that we needed to ensure that that happened. We've been keeping an eye on a few of the housing issues that have been going through the State House in the summer, like the landlord's database bill, and we've also been keeping an eye on the charter changes that have been going through as well. We obviously noticed that the non-citizen voting in Winooski and Montpelier was vetoed by Phil Scott. So we wanted to ensure that when we came back into the State House in January, we were going to come with the best possible hand. And so as a result, it currently sits in GovOps in the State House, and it's tied to the three other charter changes that passed in the 2021 town hall meeting day. We've been speaking with Sarah Copeland-Hanses. She seems fairly on board and has indicated that she would be happy to push forward so long as we've got passageway through the Senate. So we've been working with senators as well. And those conversations are ongoing. I will be at the State House on Monday as well to see if we can wrangle a few more representatives. But largely, at the moment, a lot of them are uninformed about what this is and why it's important. And so it's been an education campaign with folks within the State House. But I'm fairly confident we'll be able to find that passageway. But obviously, a week's long time in politics and everything can change quite rapidly, especially with how 2021 looks in terms of some of the statewide and federal races that might be happening, as well as all the other very important work that the State House will be focusing on. We have been gathering coalition partners as well in this meantime. Currently, we have the likes of ACLU, Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition, Hope and Peace and Justice Centre, CVOEO, Vermont Legal Aid, Hunger Free Vermont came on board as well. We've got Voices Vermont Children, and pending board approval, we've also got a number of unions that are backing us, VSEA, AFL-CIO, AFT, and VBSR, as well as Planned Parenthood as well is going to be advocating for just cause eviction in the current session. So yeah, we're basically putting our plan in place. We are finding the allies in the State House that are going to help push this, and we're hoping to try and push this through GovOps rather than go through housing itself, as we see it as a home rule issue, a charter change issue, and adhering to the will of the people rather than strictly a housing issue. I'm sure they want to weigh in on it, but we feel that we did a solid enough job in Burlington ourselves when this came through the City Council about this time last year. And we feel like it's very well written, and it just really needs to be approved so it can come back to Burlington, and we can start building the ordinances around it.
Have you been talking to senators at all, or?
Yes, so the senators we've spoken to so far, Anthony Polina, I've also spoken to Chris Pearson. We've got a conversation with Keisha Ram that's going to be happening next week. And we're setting up meetings with Jeanette White, that is the chair of the GovOps in the Senate, as I'm sure you know, Sarah, if that probably everyone in this room knows. And we're also looking to get a conversation with Alison Clarkson as well. So those meetings with senators are getting put in place, and we're aiming to speak to all of those people by the end of the year.
Great. Sounds like you've been doing a lot of work. So questions for Tom or? Yeah. It's good. This is kind of a slow time, but.
It would be good to know, Tom, if are you hearing either lack of understanding or opposition, either one of those yet?
Lack of understanding, ironically enough, I feel may come from Tom Stevens. After speaking with him, he had the opinion that the charter change wasn't specific enough, and it would be upon his committee to rewrite or write from scratch this charter change, which he himself was, one, said there wasn't really enough time for it, and two, the State House doesn't like messing with charter changes, so that was a bit of a strange comment. And second of all, he didn't seem to realize or know that several states had already implemented this statewide, and this is municipal law in a number of cities across the country. So that was the only one that really raised a red flag, but I also understand how busy reps are, and that they're pulled in several thousand different directions, and I just have to focus on this one policy. So I understand that it might be a bit of a learning curve for a few folks there, but I'm obviously happy to speak to them and get them updated.
I did have an email from Representative Stevens who wanted to talk to me about it, but we haven't been able to set a date. So.
I would be very curious to know how that meeting goes, Sarah, if you wouldn't mind give me an update after that.
Yeah, and included in that was Representative Chick Bloomley, who's from South End of town. She had wanted to come tonight, but it's her ward NPA tonight, so she's not able to make it. But I think she will join me in the conversation with Representative Stevens.
Wonderful. I actually also reached out to Tiff yesterday, I believe, so hopefully I'll be speaking to her soon as well.
Great. Has Jamie joined us?
Doesn't look like it, but I do have Travis Poulin in Willtown if you wanted to jump to the next agenda. I haven't come back, or did Jamie have a time?
Well, he didn't need, I had just told him 5:15, so and I know he was anxious to set a time.
Sure.
Time certain.
Yeah, it's 5:15 now, so to you. I haven't heard from him, so. Oh, he just joined.
Okay, great. Okay. So if you can promote Jamie.
Yeah.
Joining us is Jamie Feehan, who's Director of Government Relations at Primer Hyper something, and is a consultant with the City of Burlington who supports our legal team in statewide lobbying issues. There we go. So Jamie, what we're looking for is in this sort of slow season, which is about to get chaotic again, sort of your observations about where we are with the Just Cause eviction charter change, and any thoughts or observations you have on what we should be doing to get that passed.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for inviting me to participate. I picked attendee rather than panelist, and so I was off in the ether there for a little bit. So yes, it will be, things will be heating up soon. And in fact, in some cases already is. So I can speak to sort of where things are and some suggestions, if that's helpful, Sarah. I know that that this issue, all the charter changes, remains a priority of the city attorney's office and the mayor's office. We typically get together in the coming days or weeks in advance of every session historically, you know, to sort of identify priorities, plot next steps, and identify people both within the mayor's office and beyond to sort of help lead the charge where necessary on these things. And so that's sort of a preview. I suspect that we'll be doing that shortly as well, and sort of resume discussions on the charter bills. Because as you know, last year, the charter amendments were included in one bill that came in, you know, pretty late in the session, I guess, unfortunately. I'm looking at it now, H4 48. It was late enough that the legislature and the House Gov Ops Committee chose to separate from that list of the four changes, remove the airport question and put that in a separate bill, and the House passed that, but got to the Senate too late and went into the Senate Rules Committee. So that's kind of where things stand. They did not take action on the underlying bill. What typically happens in that committee is that they'll have a quick run through with bill sponsors. They'll typically invite the city attorney's office to talk about the mechanics and the thinking behind the charter changes. And then, you know, after some sort of committee discussion, they'll talk about, you know, what needs further testimony or consideration before they decide to act on the bill. With respect to this one, there was a little bit of a run through with the lead sponsor and maybe a couple of the others of the delegation. City's attorney's office has not been invited to come in and speak to this yet. So that is something that we'll be pursuing. And as is also typical with this current committee, they sometimes form a subgroup of the committee members to review charter changes that come in and not necessarily do the work of the committee as a subcommittee, but to kind of identify issues and bring it back to the committee. And if there aren't any issues, they share that information. If there are, then they share that as well. That subcommittee of three, which included Bob Hooper, identified, at least with the time remaining in the session, the airport as one that may be able to move by itself quickly before they adjourned. Obviously that didn't happen, but they did think that the other issues deserved a little bit more time within committee. And so they haven't had any sort of in-depth discussion on either of the Just Cause or the other issues. I suspect that'll happen. What the committee can also do, if they feel they need to, is ask their colleagues on other committees of jurisdiction to review issues and weigh in. And I mention that because that has been raised as a possibility for this Just Cause issue, because sometimes the legislature, when reviewing charters, question if they're doing something that might have either precedent for statewide actions, or if there should be a statewide policy rather than a municipal by municipal approach. I'm not saying that'll happen, but that's been raised as a possibility. It has happened before in not only Burlington charters, but other charters. As you know, the charter changes include a thermal question, and they include a ranked choice question. And so each of those others may also have a deeper dive. So through the work of the delegation last session, led by Representative Mulvaney-Stanek and with you, Sarah, I mean, there were sort of subcommittees set up for each of these charter questions, and Just Cause, of course, included there. Sarah was involved in the subcommittee for this one, as was then Councilor Pine and a few other of the advocacy groups in support of this, such as Rights and Democracy, I think the Just Cause Coalition, the Tenants Union, and we know, of course, there's some opposition. So we were preparing, and I believe we're prepared to identify people that could speak to the merits of the proposal, the functionality that this is creating, an ordinance process where additional voices can be heard through that process, but looking, of course, to the legislature for agreeing to what the will of the voters had said on this issue. So we also, I believe, the subcommittee had prepared or had ready to be prepared some materials that could be used to support the effort, both in House Gov Ops or elsewhere. So obviously that didn't get to that point, but that's where things left before they adjourned. I hope that's sort of a helpful snapshot.
Do you see these as likely having to go to the committees of jurisdiction?
Well, it would be my hope that they don't officially. Sorry, that's sort of like, legislative talk. It would be my guess that I think they would ask House General, which has jurisdiction over housing issues, to look at this. I think if I recall, is it this session, Sarah, or maybe the previous one, there may even be a pending bill on landlord-tenant rights pending in the legislature. And that would have statewide.
Pending bills, and my sense is
Christie put this one forward, didn't he, Representative Christie, Just Cause?
yes, it's something similar. So I think there is interest in it broader than Burlington, but it didn't get any legs
Right.
at all either at all last year. So I've heard a whole conversation about it.
I think it would be something that they would sort of just sort of get their input on it. House Gov Ops would probably get House General's input on this issue.
And a follow-up question to that is, if, one of the reasons to not move it forward is because, maybe folks are interested in pursuing it on a statewide issue. Is that really an argument against doing it in Burlington? Because I feel like often lawmakers are like, oh, we don't know, and it'd be nice if we had like a pilot or something. And I feel like Burlington in that way is always a perfect pilot. But I guess I'm curious how often that has been used to.
Yeah, no, your response is exactly the way to go, right? I mean, why not have someone like Burlington? And again, this is through an ordinance process, right? So it isn't just by some sort of executive fiat or whomever, that there will be an in-depth discussion through the council and elsewhere about how to develop this, where all voices will be heard. And why not try something that way? And, the legislature can treat these issues as a bill. They could put some parameters on it. They could sunset something. They could come back to us with a report to see how it's going. Come back to us with what your proposed ordinance is, so we can, any number of ways to do that. But absolutely, it's a good way to sort of pilot it out, as you say.
It is my understanding that there is definite interest in seeing something statewide. I don't know, again, what that'll look like in terms of an introduction of a bill. I think Tom Proctor had his hand raised.
Hi, Jamie. Yeah, I was. You mentioned that there was some interest from a lawmaker in maybe making this statewide, and I was just wondering who that lawmaker was. From the conversations I've had so far, folks generally seem reluctant to push something statewide. So I was curious to know who was saying that might have there might be an appetite for that.
Yeah, if you bear with me, I can try to search. Tom, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. And it may not be that this lawmaker is necessarily a champion for it, but maybe responding to someone within their district. Let me see.
There's several landlord tenant bills. I think none of them have a lot of strength behind them. I think Jamie was referring to Representative Coach Christie, who's from the White River area, I believe, but we'd have to look at that. And again, I think there are some advocacy groups wanting to see a bill, and there's what I have heard, but this is quite third hand at the moment, is in particular that with the eviction moratorium being lifted. There's a subset of folks who I think are gonna suggest that perhaps a version of just cause be implemented, because without the eviction moratorium, you're seeing a lot of just cause evictions. And so I'm not sure where that is in the mix of conversation.
Okay, it is Coach Christie's bill. It's H403. And, you know, the title's an act relating to prohibiting no cause evictions. And it's in the House General Committee with no action. And, you know, it would be my hope, and I'm sure, you know, this will be the hope of the mayor and his team as well, that there'd be quick action taken on this, you know, these charter changes before this committee gets, you know, bogged down with redistricting, for example, or pension issues that are going to be there, or
Oops,
any
yeah.
number. Sorry?
I said I forgot about that. Some government ops who will hear this.
Yeah,
will be
GovOps is
dealing
good.
with
Yeah,
the
there's
statewide redistricting,
exactly.
and that will take some attention, yes.
Yeah, it's all about
And-
self-preservation at that point for them in their
Yeah.
drawing of the maps. But that does take a lot of time, and the pensions will continue to take a lot of time. They always give deference to charter change bills, and I'm sure that'll be the case. It's just a matter of timing last year.
Ask if the Vermont League of Cities and Towns plays an active role when municipalities face this question for local control. Is that something we should expect? Jamie, or?
You know, they haven't to date. I can certainly ask the league. You know, if it was up to the league, they'd say we hate having to go to legislature to get approval for these charter changes. We'd rather have some sort of a home rule type thing. But I can't recall the league weighing in on any particular charter change, but it doesn't preclude them from doing so.
Well, I believe they weighed in on, at the end, with the non-citizen voting.
Which one?
The non-citizen voting.
Oh,
where
okay.
After the governor vetoed it, they were able to garner, and I don't know that it was the league in particular, but they got the veto override, and that's when the league did not get involved until it was vetoed. And then at that point, their argument is, you know, it's home rule and you can't veto it, and so they were able to get few other people to make enough to override it. But I think you're right, on these specific issues, they would not tend to weigh in substantively. I don't believe.
But
Tom?
on a theoretical extent, to allow, you know, the will of the voters to move forward, I mean, that's certainly a league type of an issue.
Jamie, I know you mentioned earlier on that you've not really gathered with the city yet to kind of discuss any of this in great detail, but is your organization, or do you know if this is the city itself, what angle you are planning to push this issue in the State House, either for JCE or the charter changes writ large? Is there any particular argument that you're going to the State House with?
With respect to the just cause issues?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it'll be, you know, the subcommittee. I don't see a change in the strategy at this point, Tom, in terms of talking about the merits and letting the ordinance process take place. I think it'll be, you know, the way that the city likes to operate is, I'm not usually the voice for this. I'm sort of behind the scenes, and it's the subject experts that will take the lead in providing comments, and I can help work, you know, sort of behind the scenes and compiling support and identifying any areas of opposition, et cetera.
I guess I kind of mean behind the scenes wise, have you got a particular angle you're taking this at? As your organization, have you got any particular angle you're taking this at?
No, nothing that's deviated from what I've told you, or what we all know. No new instructions, if that's what I guess maybe I'm not understanding your question.
Yeah, so we're kind of talking right now about, you know, bringing in the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. You could also take it from the angle of the fact that housing crisis is really being a major spotlight in the state right now with the end of the eviction moratorium. Obviously, we've got Sears Lane, we've got Brenda Siegel extending the hotel voucher program, the expose on Boves 2 weeks ago. So there's obviously there's a real angle there we could take with in terms of housing in general, or we could be taking this an entirely different way and saying it's about home rule. So I'm curious as to what your organization, how your organization is pushing for this in the State House.
Yeah, no, I get you now. I mean, basically what we need to do is revisit and update our talking points and points for doing this. And if anything has changed between last, since they've adjourned to today or January, that might help the push, then absolutely that, we can readjust the, those talking points and reasons for doing so. And Sarah just mentioned one, you just mentioned a couple of issues, maybe those elevate to the top, or they certainly become part of the mix. But that I haven't had those conversations with the city attorney or mayor's office yet. But obviously we can add those, and through, obviously the delegation, at some point we'll have a meeting with the delegation before the session starts, or very soon in the early days of the session. And, this may be a topic there as well. But the city has a very active delegation behind this, and we were meeting weekly, as you know, Tom, on a number of these charter changes.
Yeah, kind of on that point. I mean, I was there at each delegation meeting, and the attendance very much waned from start to finish on that front, and there was I don't know, it seemed to kind of fizzle out. So I also would be very encouraged if that delegation can meet sooner rather than later, because I feel that there's a lot we could talk about, and if we wait till the very beginning of the State House session, a lot's already going to be in place. So yeah, I'd love to see that get started up again as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I agree. I mean, I think the waning was sort of just understanding of the time left in the session, and the likelihood action was not going to happen. And as you get close to the end of the session, there's a lot flying on that was taking their time, I'm sure.
You're looking at the chat box as well. Okay. I don't see any more questions on this topic. I agree with Tom that we probably should check in with delegation and see if they don't, maybe we can get a meeting in early December on this and the other changes as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
Great. Thanks for letting me join you. Happy to anytime.
Okay.
Take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Next week, I've invited Travis Poulin and Will Town representing the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance. And Travis works for CDOEO and Will works for Spectrum, but I did this because I think a lot of folks aren't as aware of the work of the Alliance and how the intent of the Alliance is to coordinate services. So for me, it's a little bit of an education process to get up to speed on how the Alliance works. They're just about to submit an application to HUD for continuum of care money, which is a core funding source for organizations that serve the homeless. So I'm going to ask them to explain that. Through the Alliance, they also administer something called coordinated entry. I think it's called coordinated entry. And again, I'm going to ask them to explain that. So if you can promote Travis and Will at least. Oh, and Marcella, who is with CEDO and is active in the Alliance as well. So
and unmuted, and now you can see me.
there you go.
Yes, and as to what you were saying, for specific details around the submittal that's coming up, I'll certainly defer to Marcella about that. I know she's speaking next, and there's a lot of interplay between what she has to talk about and the work of the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance. Agreeing with what you just said, the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance is the name of our local continuum of care. There are multiple continuum of cares throughout the state. They all ideally serve the same purpose, which is at least twofold. One, to encourage good communication and cooperative work between multiple agencies that are providing various services to households that are homeless or at risk of homelessness within their local communities. And the second purpose, to work to submit applications for federal funding as a COC with a collaborative applicant, in this case CEDO, to draw money down from the feds to help support some of that work with specific organizations. So the goal of the CCHA is ideally to make homelessness rare and brief. We just lost my train of thought. Will, jump in.
Yeah, I think the CCHA definitely tackles a lot of different problems all at once. There's various subcommittees, you know, ranging from coordinated entry all the way to, like, right now we just started up a staffing subcommittee to kind of work together as a community and partner agencies to address, you know, our severe staffing shortage that we're experiencing right now. So yeah, it's like Travis said, the intent is to make homelessness rare and brief, and it's also just an area for agencies to collaborate, work together, and support each other.
And that's where I lost my train of thought. The words coordinated entry just suddenly flew out of my mind. You had mentioned coordinated entry. Coordinated entry, just breaking down those two words, coordinated entry, is a process. It's a process whereby we can formally work with multiple agencies that are providing those various services. So COTS, the Committee on Temporary Shelter, of course, they run a local homeless shelter, more than one actually. They provide services to individuals experiencing homelessness. CBOEO, long-term agency that provides services to people experiencing homelessness and those at risk of homelessness. Spectrum and A New Place and the Milton Family Center. Coordinated entry is a process by which we can avoid duplicating our work with specific individuals who are experiencing homelessness, whether that be individuals or families. If they agree to engage in that process, all of the agencies have signed an MOU, so we're all using the same basic paperwork. And individuals who engage in coordinated entry get an assessment completed so that we have an idea of their specific strengths and weaknesses, and so they get put on a primary list of individuals whom agencies are working with so that we know who's working with whom. We don't duplicate services. And through the use of that assessment tool, we can also focus services on those with the greatest level of need. And as part of that process, it's not just a local process, it's a statewide process. And agencies that provide actual housing, such as Burlington Housing Authority, Cathedral Square, have signed on to this more than just an MOU, actually. It's a statewide, as I said, process where they will make a certain number of apartments as they come available, exclusively available through the coordinated entry process, which again helps to funnel services to those that are most in need and give them a greater opportunity or a greater chance of trying to access long-term, safe, affordable housing. Those were a lot of words, so if anyone has any questions, just wave.
The housing providers, actually, they have units they've set aside and they go to the coordinated entry group for when they have a vacancy. Is that how that works?
Basically, coordinated entry, there is a, I don't want to call it a subcommittee, but effectively, coordinated entry meets on a weekly basis and reviews everyone on the master list and tries to connect them with housing opportunities as they become available. Now, the same big issue, of course, in dealing with folks that are experiencing homelessness, we all know that there is a lack of affordable apartments in the greater Chittenden area. in the state really, but certainly in our area, it is not easy to find something that's affordable. We work, all of the advocates across the different programs work to help people get ready to rent. People are people. They have different strengths, different weaknesses, as I said. Sometimes we're working with folks who have no ID, who have little documented history. And that's part of the advocate's job, the individual advocates at the various agencies, to work with that individual and get them ready to rent, which means helping them establish an ID, helping them get a copy of a birth certificate if they need it, helping them complete those applications for Burlington Housing Authority, Vermont State Housing Authority, Cathedral Square, O'Brien's, Winooski, however wide that net gets thrown. So there's a lot of organization and support that goes into working and providing case management, housing case management services, which multiple agencies are engaged with a large number, but not the total population of individuals experiencing homelessness that are in this county, because not everyone, A, wishes to engage in coordinated entry services, and that is a choice. And some who say they do don't actually engage with their case manager. But I hope I answered your question. Yes. So the subcommittee meets on a weekly basis and identifies, if they can, available apartments, and some of the major housing providers are part of that weekly meeting.
Joe?
Do you all have a sense of how many folks are, have engaged in this process and are sort of actively like ready to move into an apartment or looking for an apartment, but there aren't any available? Do you have a number in terms of how many folks that is?
We as a collective definitely have that number. I wish well, Marcella might have it. The lead on the coordinated entry process. She is the coordinator, but Marcella may have those numbers in front of her, whereas I do not.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of the presentation that we've got coming up next, is to look at some of the data that we've got around the CCHA and within the city as well. So I'm not holding out on you, but I've got it in some slides.
Spoiler alert, it's like 500 to 600, right, Marcella?
Yes, yeah.
And yeah, my role, aside from participating in the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance, my role here at Community Action, I'm the director of Chittenden Community Action. We work very closely. We have 4 staff that are housing case managers that work with people both for helping them complete applications for financial assistance, but they're looking for a security deposit, first month's rent, back rent, homelessness from occurring, as well as folks who are looking for financial assistance to get into housing, as one mechanism, utilizing state dollars through the Housing Opportunity Grant Program, as one fund at least. We provide housing case management services to roughly 40 people right now. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, to about 100 to 120 people right now. Each of the 4 case managers have a caseload of about 30 people. That fluctuates up and down over time. And we work very closely with CVOEO's community outreach resources and advocacy team, the CORA team, which are 3 staff that do exclusive outreach to individuals experiencing homelessness. They were very much involved in trying to provide services down at Sears Lane and other homeless encampments. We are the fiscal administrator for a pot of state funding called RRHI, the Rapid Resolution Housing Initiative, which are flexible funds designed to help people transition from federal defined literal homelessness into some form of stable shelter. Ideally, that is sort of traditional housing, a rental relationship, a rental arrangement. But these flexible funds can be used for things that other traditional funds such as HOP cannot. For instance, if somebody's been chronically homeless or even just situationally homeless and they've lost all of their physical possessions, their housing advocate could write up an RRHI application saying they really need a bed. They need a bed and a mattress and some cooking gear so that they can actually cook in their new home. And the RRHI program can help address those needs while perhaps the security deposit or first month's rent are being addressed through someone else. And of course, we've been very active, as I know a number of agencies have. We've been flooded with requests to help people apply for the Vermont Emergency Rental Assistance Program. We were helping people apply for the Vermont Community, no, let's try that one again. We were helping people apply for the Vermont COVID Arrearage Assistance Program, Phase 1 and 2. We are helping people apply for the VRAP program, the Vermont Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which can address back due rent, future rent payments, back due utility payments, and future utility payments. And we will more than likely be active in trying to help homeowners apply for the VHAP program, the Homeowner Assistance Program, when that is up and running through the Housing Finance Agency. I will stop talking now.
Travis, it's my understanding that, in fact, at the minute, there's quite a bit of funding for the VRAP program, which is the program that can pay rent. So we're in this difficult situation where, in fact, we've got resources, which we didn't have last year, but no units. Am I accurate on that?
Yes, absolutely. We have a level of funding to support folks who are homeless or at risk of homelessness that we've never had before. But with that, we are still facing, even more so than ever before in my experience, and I've worked for CVOEO for almost 30 years, with just an utter lack of available affordable housing. And of course, there's a number of reasons for that. Vermont's always had an older housing stock, check. We did so well, and honestly, it was promoted that Vermont was doing well fighting COVID, that we all are well aware, I think, of the number of out-of-staters who decided to make Vermont their home over the last 14 months or so, check. We haven't had a lot of new housing built. During the COVID pandemic, Champlain Housing Trust did a fabulous job of converting some local motels into long-term permanent housing, which was great, but also removed those motels as motels. So now the General Assistance Program is actually having difficulty finding rooms to even place people who are experiencing homelessness in temporary shelter in our county. They're having to more than ever before put people in motels out of county, assuming that they can find motels out of county. If you live in Burlington or South Burlington or one of the other areas that were affected by the recent reappraisals, that I think on a softer level at this point also has an effect, because people who owned rental properties who are seeing increases to their property taxes are going to pass those along. The market will bear some really kind of eye-popping rents that are well outside the price point of particularly the people we're working with, who are largely on fixed limited incomes or struggling to maintain more than one job just to cover their basic needs. So it's an interesting world right now. But to sum it all up, yes, we have money that we never really had before, but we're still facing the issue of there's no place to move people into. It happens at a trickle.
Marcella, do you want to add, we can go on to your presentation and then circle back and maybe open up for questions with all three of you?
Yeah, I didn't know if Brian wanted to lead off on that presentation and introduce it.
Sure,
Or
I
do
will.
you want me to just jump straight in? I don't mind.
Let's see, you're going until 7? Is that your schedule?
We can.
Yeah, if you have to.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So I think that the key thing that I want to just point to or to highlight here is that the city's role in the sort of delivery system, the infrastructure is, it's evolving right now as we speak. And I think going forward, it's going to be, I think the city needs to step up and play a more active, more sort of robust, assertive level role in this delivery system. And so that will be coming, we'll sort of we'll be putting some details to that concept over the next upcoming weeks and sharing it with you all in public, honestly. Historically, the city's approach has been primarily to serve as a conduit for funding and to encourage organizations to serve a whole range. You know, we used to refer to it, and I think it's still appropriate, as a ladder of tenure. And the ladder of tenure is homeownership that if you're getting the American dream, you're at the top of the ladder. And if you're at the bottom, you're moving into something more along the lines of shelter. And then there's all these rungs that we've tried to build on that ladder so that people have hopefully the support to find the best place for them on that ladder. And right now we are, as this discussion has illustrated, just incredibly challenged with lack of supply. So no matter where we're looking at the ladder, what rungs, there's just nothing at any rung right now. So our efforts are going to be focused on the most vulnerable because the market left to itself doesn't meet those needs and never will. So our focus is to make sure that the limited resources we have, although right now it looks like we're swimming in resources, the reality is the need still outstrips what we have available even under COVID. But we are trying to find ways to leverage the existing resources and give the city more of sort of a central coordinating role that will hopefully result in the ability for us to be nimble in responding to needs and be able to marshal the resources from the city, from the state, from the federal, and then support our partners who are out there actually doing the work day to day. So that's sort of a high level overview, but I think this slide presentation that Marcelo is going to run through is some information that the committee certainly will benefit from having, but I think more broadly it would be something I want to take on the road maybe, because as we've looked at it, I've realized others should probably learn this, because I think people in the community are really feeling, based on the ARPA survey, how's homelessness, I think, is number one and housing is number two. So overwhelmingly, that's what we're seeing. Good news is we'll get to some of these new initiatives that we'll talk about, and I think we have a little bit of, some glimmers of hope here. Marcelo, why don't you take it?
Yeah, thank you. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Is it up?
Yep.
Good. Okay, thanks, Brian. We put this together within our kind of team that's working together in CEDO to try and put into context how we're operating and how we work within our COC, within the continuum of care, and to try and bring some data to you as well. And essentially this information is to respond to the request that came out of the council resolution for information on available resources for folks who are experiencing houselessness at the moment. But we kind of wanted to put that information into the context of the system that we're operating in. And I wanted to thank Travis for for running through so comprehensively the CCHA, because it means I can go through the PowerPoint much more quickly, and you won't suffer death by PowerPoint at this time of the evening. So we're looking at this as an overview of our response, and we wanted to kind of bring to you the available resources that we have, and as Brian said, kind of some of the glimmers of hope and the next steps that we might be moving on to. So we're going to have a quick look at the continuum of care and coordinated entry. And then we're going to have a look at some of the data points that we work from within coordinated entry and our point in time count, and also the housing inventory count that we have, which are kind of three sets of data that we work from within the continuum of care. And then we're going to look at, Samantha's going to take it off with some of the next steps on interventions. So this is a useful diagram, I think, that shows what Travis was describing of what a continuum of care is, and the kind of different sections of the continuum of care and the different areas that we work in terms of having outreach, emergency shelter, transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing. As Travis said, it's a regional or local planning body that coordinates housing services and funding for families and individuals experiencing homelessness or houselessness. And it was really designed to be a way to encourage a more structural and strategic approach to housing and providing services to folks who are experiencing homelessness. So we've traditionally worked with this kind of 4 parts of a continuum. So these 4 areas of work. And within our strategic plan, I'll put up the model of the strategic plan in a moment. We've kind of kept within those models. But as we're evolving here in Burlington and as we're moving through this pandemic, we're also realizing that we have to broaden the areas that we're working in, including folks who are unsheltered and experiencing homelessness. So these, as I said, are the areas of a continuum of care and of our continuum of care, the CCHA. As Travis said, within the state, there are a number of continua in different areas. We're the only area that has only one continuum of care in Chittenden County. And the other side that the federal funding flows to is referred to as the balance of state. And that's a collective of all of the other continuums of care. So
the federal money comes directly to, or is coordinated through the Chittenden County one?
No, the balance of state makes its own application for funding in the same way that we do as a CCHA.
Right, but Chittenden County has its bucket and then the balance of the state has their bucket.
Yeah. So we're CEDA's a collaborative applicant for the CCHA, and we recently submitted our annual consolidated application, and that's it's just under 1.5 million in a range of projects that include permanent supportive housing, transitional rapid rehousing, the coordinated entry funding, and data funding. Am I forgetting anything, Travis? I think that's and
Those are the
also
major ones,
domestic
yeah.
violence.
Yeah.
Steps. And you can see that kind of reflected in this diagram of this. The other reason that we're operating in this way is to try and make sure that services are developed and given in a person-centered manner, so that we model what's called the no wrong door approach, so that folks can enter the system from any one of the places or any one of the partners that are operating within the system, whether it's through street outreach or partners or calling 211 or any other points of access that they might have. As you can see, that's saying, supportive services should be delivered at all points to help folks be successful as they're moving through and into hopefully permanent housing, and continuing with those services as folks need them in permanent housing. So this is just a graphic demonstration of what Travis has so ably described. So our continuum of care, the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance, is a very broad alliance. One of my colleagues had asked us to put together this slide to give you an idea of the range of services that are provided. And forgive me if any of this is wrong, and if I haven't included everybody's services to their fullest extent, because we have a lot of people doing a lot and a lot of people responding to what is a really severe crisis at the moment. So this is, as an example, a list of the folks who are on our steering committee, a list of the organizations that are on the steering committee. So they're voting members of the continuum. Anybody is welcome to become a member. We also included within the structure and the governance structure of the CCHA are folks with lived experience, and they are represented on our steering committee and executive committee and in the subcommittees as well. And it's very important to us that we're bringing that informed view into any of the work that we're doing. So this is, as an example, a list of our partners: shelter providers, service providers, housing providers, local government, and state level government that's involved within it, and the range is, again, another way of looking at the range of services that each of those provide, whether it's emergency shelter, transitional housing, through permanent housing, and then other types of supportive houses that might go with permanent or transitional housing. We've had a really big increase. We've been fortunate to have a large increase in the amount of outreach services we're able to provide to bring people into contact and connection with the system, and also an increase in the housing case management services as well. our partners all struggle, as Travis and Will both described, to fill positions at the moment. And that's, you know, whilst we have funding, one of the issues that we're looking at is the limitations on our partners' ability to provide services because of staffing restrictions. Just to move more quickly through.
What
Staffing.
Oh, staffing.
It's not a
Yeah. CVOEO has a number of positions open, including 2 positions to help prepare VRAP applications if you know anyone that's looking.
Thank you.
Just before you jump, I noticed there's no other municipal representatives on that. And maybe we can leave that conversation to the end because I'm curious how we can engage other municipalities.
Yeah, and I can talk to that a little bit as we're going through as well. But yeah, certainly I can answer that question. So the strategic plan is kind of central to the way that we're operating, and we're also in the process. We're about to start a revision of it, and we're looking forward to working, you know, kind of with the city in terms of whatever moves we may make through CEDA and through the mayor's office and through the city generally, in terms of responding to the current crisis. So currently the strategic plan is focused on, as Brian was talking about, the 3 legs of the stool to combat homelessness and housing insecurity. And those are focused on increasing options for case management, addressing the need for housing vouchers and subsidized housing, and increasing housing stock. We've got the strategic plan that we currently have at the moment that we're working from, and as you can see, that's again focused around those 3 legs. As I said, we're going to be looking at revising this in terms of identifying gaps and needs that we're seeing at the moment. I know that one area, as I said before, that we're really conscious that we don't include here is how to respond to folks who are living unsheltered and living in encampments, and what alternatives or what other resources we may be able to put out towards that, but also just including it within the strategic plan. This presentation is available as a PDF, so I hope this will be like a reference document for folks to go back to. And as I said, we were really just wanting to put the data that we're about to present in the context of like this is how service provision and homelessness response is organized across the country, but more specifically within Chittenden County. So as Travis was describing, the coordinated entry system is part of the COC and is one of the reasons for existence of the COC. And it's the coordinated entry system itself is housed at CVOEO, but operated across all of the partners within our continuum. And again, it's responding in the same way, trying to make sure that the system is person focused and that we're, kind of responding to each person as an individual and responding to their needs. So just briefly, within the coordinated entry system and process, as Travis was describing, people can come in at, we have the no wrong door approach, people can come in at any point. And it's a method of triaging, if you like, assessing each case, giving a vulnerability score to each person and or family, and looking to ensure that our community is prioritizing folks by those who are most in need, and also allocating in a strategic manner the resources that we have, and also identifying what additional resources we may need to be able to respond to the problem of folks experiencing houselessness. So I just wanted, I don't know if anyone has any questions around that structure, or if you're all completely bamboozled by so many diagrams and pictures, but I wanted to move on just quickly to look at some of the data points that we use that come from both coordinated entry and also from our COC system. We have what's called an annual point in time count, which is conducted at the end of January. And we're required to do that by HUD, but it's also a good practice to do it as well. And the point in time count is a count of both sheltered and unsheltered individuals. Sheltered individuals in either shelters or in emergency, within the GA system, the emergency housing there. We don't count within the point in time count folks who are marginally housed or couch surfing, because the number that we're looking at is the HUD identified number of somebody. We're using the HUD, what's the word I'm looking for? The HUD definition of homelessness at that point. So the point in time count, there are kind of legitimate criticisms of the way that the data may be gathered, but it's also like, it's conducted every year in the same fashion. So it gives us a point in time, and it gives us some data to look at over a period of time. This is the count of individuals sheltered and unsheltered, and just a simple chart from 2009 up to 2021. The blue is folks who are sheltered, so that's in shelters or as I said, in hotels and emergency hotel spaces, and the orange is folks who are unsheltered. As you can see, we were kind of working with some success to reduce numbers. We'd had some success in Chittenden County, particularly working with veterans who were experiencing houselessness, and also are chronically homeless as well over a period of time. But as you can see, in 2021, we hit a very large number indeed. It was an almost threefold increase in folks experiencing homelessness during that count. There are a couple of provisos with that. Number one, there's a school of thought that says that this isn't a lot of additional folks who were experiencing homelessness. This is just simply because the GA system was available at that time, that we were just exposing the reality of the number of folks who are housing insecure or houseless at that point. The second thing to note on this is that there was no unsheltered count last year because of the pandemic. We will be conducting an unsheltered count this year. And so we'll be working hard to make sure that we get an accurate count at that point in January of 2022. This is a breakdown of those PIC count numbers, and I'm sorry for some of the language at the bottom. It's not, they're not good descriptions. I think these are again the HUD descriptors that are used. But we wanted to show you this to just see, so that you could see, once again, this sharp increase in 2021, but also the fact that we're looking at different population groups within here, and we can see that it's a similar impact across population groups, whether we're looking at folks who are chronically homeless, those experiencing different forms of mental illness, those with substance use disorders. We're seeing the same impact and the same patterns across folks who are experiencing different issues. This is, again, the chart to look at. This is, and again, this is to help you to understand the types of definitions and language that's used around homelessness. This is a chronically homeless individuals count from the PIC count. Again, as you can see, there was dramatic increase, more than threefold. Chronic homelessness there's a very long and complex definition of it from HUD, but essentially it's somebody who's been experiencing homelessness for 12 months or more. There's a slightly more complex definition than that, but that's the kind of essence of it. And of course, because of the GA system, which was a good thing, providing shelter to people. We have seen and will see ongoing a large increase in the number of folks who will have been within that system for 12 months or more, and so thereby, by extension, we'll see an increase in this count as well. We also wanted to show you this slide is the PIT count broken down by families and individuals. I'm quite surprised actually that this number of families was so low in 2021. I've no reason to think that that data is inaccurate, but I know that last night's count, for instance, of children in hotels, so that's not folks who are in shelter, but just people who are in the emergency system. I know there were 93 children in hotels, and I think there were about 250 rooms, so that's about 250 families at that point. So that would seem to be, that's quite a low number, that 30, but you can really see within this that the increase in numbers and those who are impacted were often in individuals and not necessarily families. This is just a demonstration of whether people were in emergency shelter or whether they were in transitional housing at the point in time count. And again, the large majority of folks were in emergency shelter, and the majority of those were in the hotel system. This is one of our last slides to answer the question around coordinated entry. This is data going across the last year. So we wanted to show you from the beginning of the pandemic, April 2020. So this was kind of our norm, if you like, back at that point. That was what we were working with in the COC in terms of number of households and families that were on the master list of coordinated entry at that point was under 350 in total, or at 307, and you can see there was just a gradual increase as outreach workers were making contact with, and case management workers were making contact with families and bringing them into the system. We peaked at over 800 in the earlier part of this year, 800, and the numbers dropped down to 673 total households and 48 families within that. That's where we're at the moment. Stephanie, the CE system administrator, is doing a great deal of work to make sure that the lists are updated and are accurate. So we may see some reduction in those. That reduction was partially because we had some folks housed and there was some housing that came online in the last few months. You were talking just now about the CHT housing, but we have seen some reduction ongoing, but I wonder what will happen as the GA system opens up again in the next few days, if we're going to see another increase. And we were talking earlier on about inflow and outflow. We also wanted to show you this data. This is another way that we use data within the COC and some other information that we look at. This is from a group that's called Built for Zero. It's a program that the COC has been involved in for a number of years, and we're trying to re-engage with them in terms of strategically using data to look at what our options are to improve outcomes and decrease numbers. And the reason that this is particularly important is that this has given us, this is from November 18 to March 2021. And this is looking at inflow and outflow for those who are chronically homeless. And using data in that way allows us to understand what the changes are within the system. You know, if we're suddenly seeing a lot of inflow, it would cause us to stop and question what's happening with retention, or if there are other factors at play. If there's more outflow of families or individuals from the system than inflow, that will be marked. You can see down here these are the kind of areas you're looking for. This is marking when you've had a success over a period of time of more folks leaving the system than coming into the system. It means you're doing something right, and hopefully you can look at what it is you're doing right and learn from that. And I'm happy to go on afterwards and talk a little bit about Built for Zero, but this program and this type of information is really crucial to us as we're working, I think, as a continuum to understand what we're doing, when we're doing it well or badly, and how we can improve. So the last piece of information that I wanted to share was the question that was asked of us, which was, what's the inventory of available emergency housing or shelter? Now, at the same time as the PIT count every year, that once a year collection of data, there's something called the housing inventory count, which is an overall collection of information of housing and emergency shelter that's available like within the COC system. But this isn't all emergency housing, but I just wanted to kind of put this on record and let you have access to this number and this information from the 2021 count. So again, it's a point in time count. It's from January 2021. And it is an inventory of all of the provider programs within the continuum of care. And it's all of the provider programs that provide beds and units that are dedicated to serving people experiencing homelessness, or some of them are permanent housing, but they're people who have been experiencing homelessness as they're going into that system. This next slide is the inventory of where we are that we collected for you on the 1st of November. And so that's the listing of the shelter spaces that we have and the open capacity, and the open capacity is 14 beds. And those 14 beds were because an additional dorm was opened up at one of the COT stations as they were kind of deconcentrating rooms as they were coming out of the pandemic. So at a rough count, we had about 530 beds. We actually had possibly slightly more, and the open capacity was 14. Down here, you can see that was the count that night for the number of folks who are in various hotels through the state emergency housing system. On that day, it was 223. I think last night it was up to about 250. And as I said, there were 93 children and about 300 adults within those rooms. As of today, this afternoon, I was talking with the state and there were 0 rooms available in Chittenden County. Every day they have a turnover of folks for different reasons, and they have kind of 5 or 6 rooms coming available each day. From Friday, the eligibility restrictions on the within the GA program will be relaxed, and people will be able to access it more easily, except for the fact there's no availability. So folks will have to go out of county or wait until there is availability. I know that the our ESD partners are working to try and identify additional rooms, but this is the stark reality of where we're at. So on that happy note, again, I'm happy to go back to any of these slides and talk to you about them. I'd like to pass over to Samantha so that she can talk about the next steps that we're engaging in and possible interventions.
Christine, you can put all these slides on our site.
They're up on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, they're up as a PDF. Is Samantha there, or is she lost the will to live after that?
I think she and I talked about it, and since I'm here,
Okay.
like it made sense to kind of go through it since the committee's here, and I don't know, we'll hopefully-
Is Samantha Lewin
Samantha
here?
Dunn is here.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to introduce her.
Yeah,
I'm just a little slow.
Okay.
Going over
Well, we'll let
the-
Shine show
There
it,
she
maybe.
is.
I'll talk very slowly.
Yeah.
The one piece of news as of today that I just wanted to share is An effort that the city has funded with, the city council approved, was the use of ARPA funds to start up again the resource center, also known as the daytime warming shelter. And 21 people came to the doors the first day. And that, while it isn't housing, it is hopefully a opportunity for folks to certainly stay warm and stay safe during the day, but perhaps more in a more substantive way, give them a portal, if you will, an entryway into greater opportunity for services and support. And it is, as Will said, amazing resource and much needed. And I think if we can just acknowledge that there's so many multiple related efforts that are needed for us to tackle this issue. And as Councilor Carpenter has pointed out, it's largely a state issue that our city is trying our best to handle, but that we have limited resources and limited ability, and we don't have a cadre of staff people who work for the city that work on this issue only. We have lots of other duties that we need to attend to. So that's not meant to be an excuse, it's just meant to explain that the local government's role has, it is evolving and it is growing, and I think we will embrace more of a robust municipal role, but just acknowledge that historically speaking, it has been something that the state has attempted to intervene in. I would just add that my career in this field began really with activism in the 80s, and the idea of homelessness in the 80s was extremely brief and extremely rare. So less than 40 years ago, this was not a top issue for our city and for CDOT to deal with. It is really an issue that has come about over the last several decades as a result of failed federal policy around how mental health issues were addressed or not addressed, deinstitutionalization, slashing HUD's budget, just a number of federal decisions that were made that got us to where we are today. So that was not even in the presentation, but I just felt like it was important.
Well, it was interesting that the number of, it showed the different types of folks, and the half of them, or half, but almost half, mental health. And that's what I see, and what gets my frustration is because the mental health system is not a municipal system.
Right, that's right. That's a really good point.
And I think it was extremely exacerbated, for better or for worse, because of the Boston State Hospital.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
you know, we always forget that, as awful as that was, it was a roof over your head.
That's right. Yeah. And I would just note that one of the projects you did at Cathedral Square, Monroe Place,
Yeah,
is the type of thing we need to do more of right now.
absolutely.
But the federal dollars that were there 25 years ago, they did that, are scarce and really hard to come by. But we can talk more about that and what that looks like and why it works for folks, because it really has been incredibly successful. And so let's go to the next slide. We're on. There we are. Okay. Who's our driver of this slideshow? Is it Marcella?
Marcella.
Oh, it is.
I think
Oh, okay.
The intermediate was just to remind people what we talked about a half hour ago in terms of the different entry points.
Thank you.
So I don't know if
Got
that's
it.
helpful.
Throw it right back in there. Excellent. Thank you very much. So I think it's appropriate that we as a city, and the mayor has used the bully pulpit to advocate for continuation of the general assistance support for folks who are experiencing homelessness, and not due to the city's efforts alone, but we were part of that effort to really advocate for that to continue, and luckily it goes through April 1st of 2022. As I mentioned, the Community Resource Center not only opened today, but if Congress approves the budget bill, there's funding in there for an additional full year of operation, as in we think a 12-month operation, not a seasonal thing. And the goal is to really develop the funding sources so that we can continue a actual center that will continue to operate.
Who's stepping in?
CPOEO under contract with the city. The idea of safe parking is something that came up multiple times many years ago. I thought it was not a great role for the city to play, but over time it has become clear that we need to offer something like safe parking. It seemed a bit like sort of throwing up a white flag and saying we surrender, we're just gonna let folks try to live in their cars. It seemed like it was not a great response from a public policy standpoint, but I think I've started to understand that that is actually not an unreasonable way for folks to live who either aren't safe living in buildings or shelters or other settings. And this is going to be an opportunity for that. We don't have the answers as to where and how many, but we're discussing with DPW and Parks and Rec the idea of a safe parking facility on city property. So that's happening right now. The new brick and mortar emergency shelter is, again, something that we wouldn't have picked a year or two ago and said that should be our focus. But it's clear that we need to either increase the beds available through one of the existing facilities or find another way. And another way is the type of work that is, or the type of project that our partner organization that's really active in this area, Champlain Housing Trust, is acquiring properties that can be converted immediately to serve folks rather than have to go through the permitting and financing and complicated putting together the financing to do new construction. So it'll be I think Michael Monte's on this meeting. I don't know if you can see him, Christine, but it wouldn't be bad for us to hear what CHT has in the works over the next 6 to 12 months, because I think it's pretty aggressive what they're planning to do. And he's here. There it is. Okay, good. In addition, we are, and you all have heard about this. This is not totally new, but the idea of developing essentially individual, not units per se, but bedrooms located on city land, some number of units or bedrooms that would be available through modular construction of something. People like to say tiny homes, but it's more like tiny bedrooms is what it should be called, because it really is sleeping pods would be more appropriate. We don't know where that's going to happen in the city. We did throw around the idea of North Beach. There's some issues and concerns with North Beach. So rather than say we know where it's going to go, it'll be on city land. It'll have access to infrastructure, and we recognize that people need access to bathrooms and showers and a place to prepare food. So it's a little more involved than just ordering some modular units and plopping them in the parking lot. But that's an effort that is also underway in our office. We are, like Michael can talk about what CHT is doing, but 2 projects to note. COTS is developing permanent housing for families, homeless families that are exiting hotels, motels, and shelters. And that is on Main Street behind the existing COTS facility, which, for those who know older properties, it used to be the YWCA across from Edmonds. GHT is in the early stages of a development on the land which currently has the VFW, and that would be about a 30 to 33 unit development. 8 or 9 of those units would be reserved specifically for homeless, and because it's the VFW, they want us to focus on making those first available to homeless veterans. As you saw, the numbers, if you noticed, very, very low numbers for homeless vets, but that, unfortunately, that's not like a static thing. That changes as time goes on. We haven't necessarily solved the issue of veteran homelessness.
Well, they have the more robust case management.
They do.
And subsidies for case management.
Yeah, they do.
So,
Exactly.
I mean, that speaks to what works.
That's a good point. Yeah, because of their veteran status, they have the Veterans Administration providing them with support, and that's certainly a big part of that. I think the ARPA fund allocation process will seek to even develop some further, some additional affordable units, permanently affordable units. And of those, I think we can expect at least a quarter will serve homeless folks who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And the last area that I want to just mention is that the administration is discussing both internally, and we've just started doing sort of a consultation or listening sessions with the service provider community around what is the city's role and appropriate role in terms of providing more support, more coordination around the continuum of care and coordinated entry to bolster that system so that, you know, for instance, when the housing authority has subsidies, even though we know there's a lack of units, we are focusing like laser beams on the homeless folks who are in coordinated entry to get access to those vouchers, so that we're not, you know, essentially sending back federal dollars that could otherwise provide housing and services to folks. We, as a city, have taken sort of a more of a administrative role in the continuum of care in the past. And the idea here is that we would be much more engaged in a more active role, both in the continuum, in coordinated entry, and ensuring that we are really planning for the goal that is homelessness is brief and rare. And this is something that, again, we'll provide more detail on over the coming weeks, but should hopefully expect to see us with a kind of whole new level of focus on homelessness within CEDO and within the city. Marcella, Samantha, Katie, you're all part of this, so if there's something that you want to add, that would be appreciated now.
I would just add, you know, in terms of the city's increased role, it's been kind of a gradual progression from us just being an entity that sits on the continuum of care without really having our hands on the money or being a collaborative applicant, to becoming a collaborative applicant, to assuming the procurement of supportive housing voucher grants. And I think now it's like, what more can we do to support the COC, the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance, kind of given the degree, the difficulty of the challenges that are being faced. So I would just add that historical piece of kind of the city's role. And then to your point earlier, just trying to see, like, working with Winooski and Colchester, like what their role might be as well. Like, I think the city, we're willing to lead it, but like, I think we need partnership as well, because it is countywide. It's not just Burlington. And I think to treat homelessness as only a Burlington problem isn't getting at it, because people.
It's interesting when we looked at the list of I mean, I didn't see a low barrier shelter in Essex. I don't think there's one in South Burlington. And,
yeah, it's true. We have added, I think, in some ways, because the services are here, we've always accepted that Burlington will host most of this. But I think we've heard over and over again from folks who are experiencing homelessness that it's, you know, they'd like a little more option if they could. There was a time when COTS has a building in Winooski that was designed for homeless veterans. I don't know how that fits into their inventory now, who lives there, but that's not the only other. Yeah.
honestly, I mean, in some of those jurisdictions have space and maybe more opportunities.
I think this is where bringing in Michael to speak about
Yeah.
CHT, because they're looking at projects in other towns. They do have Harbor Place in Shelburne, and they've got projects coming up in Colchester and Williston, so maybe we enable Michael if you're interested.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Very well.
On my home computer, I'm not on my laptop at work, and so it's unfamiliar for me with Zoom. I would say, first of all, I would like to say that many of the municipalities will probably say that they have been very involved in dealing with the issues of homelessness, because if you think about the motel-hotel system, none of that has happened within Burlington. It has only happened in South Burlington and in Shelburne, in Colchester. And they have felt that during this, at least during the pandemic, they have really stepped up to deal with a range of sort of behavioral issues within those shelters and those places. So they might disagree, at least in the short term, not necessarily long-term facilities like COTS and others. For us, we have certainly been engaged in working in Shelburne for quite a bit of time, and Harbor Place is there, and we're about to close Harbor Place by the Days Inn, continue to have a motel system there. the whole hum out on Wilson Road is going to continue to operate as COVID isolation, but so there's about 100 or so motel rooms that we're operating within 2 different adjoining jurisdictions. Very quickly, the list, and this is, if anybody writes this down and says, no, that number is wrong, I'll swear I tried my best. We're gonna have 32 apartments for homeless folks opening up at the Town Place Suites in Williston. And we hope to have that happening over the next 6 months. We've been held up because people have wanted us to leverage other money. Otherwise, we would have been operating that sooner. In the short term, it's being used for refugees until we can get it going and operating. So we're trying to figure that out now, but that'll be 32 apartments there. We'll do 20 in Shelburne. When we do Harbor Place, we're going to convert 20 of the apartments that are there now into permanent housing. 15 in Colchester out by the fort. And because we're building 60 apartments there. So I'm just talking about the homeless numbers, not the apartment numbers in particular. And then another 20 in South Burlington. Eventually, we hope to close the whole hum as a COVID isolation quarantine facility and turn that into permanent housing. We did about 100 or so apartments, 106, I think was the number that was specifically for homeless. If we talk about steps to end domestic violence, it's really more like 130. We hope to do about 100. We expect that, I would say that with turnovers and everything else, we expect to do about another 120 every year. Our goal is to do 500 apartments over the next few years, of which 25% of that would be for homeless. And then with turnovers, we're hoping that we could do essentially what would be a few hundred apartments, very specifically targeted to homeless. We don't have anything in particular around chronically homeless. We did Beacon Apartments once. I think there might be a potential need for that kind of community. Kind of when you think about Sears Lane and the sort of the intentional community that's sort of there, that's what basically folks have done at Beacon. In some ways, they have created community there at that location. So I think, we're engaged in a lot of levels. I think most of what I've just talked about is outside of Burlington. There are a handful of developments in Burlington right now that could be additional rental housing, but those are going to be probably in the next few years, not immediate. It was great to see the slide that CEDO put up about all the opportunities. So Brian, you'll get a call tomorrow morning. So and Marcella and Samantha. But I think I think the local communities surrounding Burlington have been putting up a lot of housing, and much of what we do, whenever we do it, we do about 25% for homeless folks. And again, with turnovers and everything else, we're hitting that number. So we're not going to end homelessness next year, but I think if the numbers can come down, okay. So we're also not the only player. Burlington Housing Authority, there are other organizations, Cathedral Square, who could do more here, have done plenty here, and could do more in terms of grabbing that number. So when we have openings, we go to the coordinated entry program and systems. How people are participating in that program, and we try to house as many homeless people as we possibly can, balancing out communities with folks who are simply in need of affordable housing. I think I'll stop there.
Michael, could you speak to how you fund services and who provides them to tenants?
We've been lucky in a couple of projects we've done lately. Samantha Dunn knows this work really well, I think, and often enough we are not able to fund services within a property because it costs, it's expensive. But for Susan's place, we were able to sort of have a decent amount of money per unit per month, is the term we use, that allowed us to fund essentially 2 social workers and 1.5 social workers. We'll do the same thing.
Where did that come from? Sorry,
Operating budget.
Comes from monthly rent. Since those properties have very low debt, we insisted upon lower debt, and instead of debt, putting that money into services.
Okay.
We've been able to do that with Town Place Suites and Susan's Place. We're not able to do that with our typical low income tax credit projects. And frankly, At around 4 o'clock, I had tea with some people who will hopefully donate some money to CHD to help fund services. So we have to raise money for that. There is a effort going on statewide right now to look at permanent supportive housing and services and how to better support housers. And that SASH is one model, Pathways is another model. We think we're sort of participate with those, but also have our own idea of how we might proceed with that. And we went from 2 resident services folks to 7 people throughout at the right now after when the pandemic started, we had 2, now we have 7. And basically are working a lot of people into better outcomes. When people come to us, ultimately, there's usually a short-term service oriented, but then they sort of drop away from the traditional service providers, and where they're, we're kind of, I don't want to say we're left with people, but often enough we still have to be there and continue to sort of work with individuals, because folks don't suddenly become like, perfect human beings with no issues overnight. Sometimes it takes years to go through the issues that folks are working through, and so sometimes the service is a little too short term, and so we're trying to build up on the tail end of that part. But what we look at this in 3. I think I might have texted Brian. We think of subsidy, supply, and services as the 3 parts of the stool. You use those, you sort of use that language, I think it was in your slide, but that's a shorthand for us. We need more housing, we need more service dollars, everybody does. And we need, the subsidies are there, but we need to make sure that they stay there and continue to build over time. I'm gonna shut up.
Great. Got about 10 to 15 minutes left. I did want to just introduce Samantha, who's the newest CEDO person, I believe, and I've done work with Samantha in her previous career with Housing Vermont, now Ever North, but welcome. Samantha has a wealth of experience in development, so I'm sure it will be a great addition to the CEDO office.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm very excited to be here. I wish I was in the room with you, but you can hear I've come down with a cold, and I figured people were not interested in that entering the Sharon Busher, but I'm really excited to be with the city and still have the opportunity to work with you and work with Michael. Lots of good work happening in this community that I've been involved with as an affordable housing developer, and I'm very excited to get to be part of the solution in Burlington at this point.
Great.
I know Marcella has her hand raised, so I'm going to let her.
Marcella?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond on that point around partnership with other municipalities, and what Michael said was very well taken in terms of the incredible input that other municipalities have had during the pandemic. We do work with them on the PIC count, and we do work in partnership. And we've been looking at how to improve contact and how to work more with our surrounding sister towns and municipalities during the strategic plan process as well for the CCHA. So it is something that we understand and we've discussed, and we are looking at other ways of developing that partnership and recognizing the impacts on those towns as well.
I'm curious what sort of state level coordination there is with the continuum, talking about this conversation about how it's not just a Burlington or a Chittenden County problem. I'm curious, how these conversations might manifest in the state legislature, and what we can do to break this logjam.
We have a seat on the balance of stake and organization, the Vermont VCEH, Vermont Coalition to End Homelessness, So like, you know, we kind of have representation across those two organizations. And the state departments are kind of active on the CCHA and on VCH. So we have representation from AHS and OEO and ESD as well, to use lots of acronyms. So there's at that level, there's a lot of coordination at that kind of service level. And in terms of working with the legislature, yes, that happens as well. Will, do you want to speak to that a bit more? I think you probably have more experience with that.
Yeah, I think that definitely happens at a couple different levels. We have a homelessness awareness day at the legislature that is a combined effort from the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance as well as the Balance of State. And then at a more micro level, there's a coalition, Vermont Coalition of Runaway and Homeless Youth Programs, that is all the state youth providers similar to Spectrum that meet, and we do legislative advocacy and a number of other things. So there is statewide coordination. Obviously, there is an opportunity to further that. And I think, you know, the pandemic has, I think, brought that more to the forefront, and people are more excited to coordinate across the state. Not to bore you with more data and coordinated entry type things, but we are switching our software database and keeping that coordinated statewide, not differing between Chittenden County and the rest of the state, and hopefully or potentially moving towards a statewide sharing, which would allow more seamless coordination and less duplication of people in the system as they move
Big
up.
step forward. The deja vu all over again, but it's been working on it for a while.
I'm also curious if, you know, the fluctuations in numbers, the open cases, is that something that, you know, sort of fluctuates the way the unemployment number fluctuates, like folks get discouraged and leave, exit the system, and so they're more counted in that number? Does it work like that, or if folks sort of like stop communicating, are they still included in that count?
Yeah, there is a period of inactivity. I believe it's 90 days. If your housing navigator or case manager cannot get in contact with you, people on the list are moved to inactive and not counted in that count. And then if they do resurface, it's a simple click a button, reactivate, and it's pretty seamless.
But isn't, maybe I didn't hear you right, but one of the, not reasons, but the spike in the data is because we've got so many people in the hotel system, which is a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing that they're in a hotel room, and previously they've been unidentified. The problem is we don't have anywhere to put them, but that seems like part of the issue.
Do you want me to? Yeah, so I think there are kind of there were different data points up there. The coordinated entry, it's true that if folks have been within the hotel system and therefore had contact with housing case management as part of that, as part of being in the general assistance program, they would have been added to the coordinated entry system. But I also think there was an increase in numbers because, as we said, it was like shining a light on what was actually there. You know, those, if folks were housing insecure and then they were doubling up and had to move out because of the pandemic, you know, they had to deconcentrate their households. It's shining a light on that housing insecurity.
Yeah, I think both factors are true in this circumstance.
One final comment. You know, I'm just hopeful that, you know, as we're moving into starting to prepare for the legislative session, if, you know, this sort of identifying properties to build more affordable units, if that conversation will be happening at a statewide level, And then, you know, it just seems to me also that conversations around substance use disorder and mental health and the workforce more broadly, it feels like these conversations happen in silos. And so, you know, we're talking about like a housing first approach to really ensuring that all of these things are happening together and are more interconnected and overlapping than, you know, just a bunch of planks that some folks might be lucky enough to be caught by. Thank you all for the work that you're doing to get folks housing, services. It's a challenge, and I know we have a serious workforce shortage right now. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I also just want to, you know, say thank you to CEDO specifically and Marcella for taking on a ton of work over the last probably year and being great partners. I think, you know, the presentation that Brian gave around upcoming goals and opportunities is really encouraging to me because it's not looking at like a one-step fix for this. It's really starting at the ground level with like a community resource center and moving all the way through with those partnerships with CHT into permanent housing, including shelter and that. And I think, you know, we're always looking for an answer of how to end homelessness, and it really has to be a multi-tiered approach with a lot of options for people to choose from. There's not one size fits all, and it's really encouraging to see that, you know, there's a lot of people that are viewing it that way. So I appreciate that very much.
Councilors or anyone else, any more questions? We've got a lot to chew on, and I guess I'm viewing this as almost a standing agenda item, unfortunately for some indefinite amount of time, to keep getting updates of what we can do, what we should do. So we'll keep working on it.
Will there be a new pit count in January? Okay.
Okay. We have one last agenda item, which may be too ambitious for the evening, which was to sort of look at a committee work plan going into next year. You know, if we, councilors, did you have any ideas? We can talk about them now for a few minutes, or we can really focus on that in our next meeting. You know, I think tackling this is going to be critical. Following up on Just Cause will be critical. We've just adopted going into 22 a resolution that's going to ask us to start looking at some of our tax policy issues, which is big bite to true. And I think we've got to do a little brainstorming about how we're going to tackle that, because that's not going to happen quickly or in the short term, but we need to figure that one out. So maybe that, even a work session, do we set a December meeting? What's the date? We decided on whatever today is, the third
Thursday of every month,
Yeah.
so that puts us at the 16th of December
Okay.
for our next meeting.
Yeah. So I don't know if Joe is right, have thoughts now. I think tackling that plan over the next year is something we want to sort out how we're going to do it. And being mindful, given the extent of work the CEDO office has, you know, the resolution we passed talked about the need for some sort of consulting support for that. So I think it'll be our job, or this committee's job, to talk through that. You know, what is it we would need? What does that look like? What are the questions we want to answer, and how to proceed with that?
What's your time frame for that piece of work to actually get a consultant in and start working on that?
I think I sort of envision us starting the conversation in January after the appeals process is concluded. So, starting to look at the summary of that, develop a list of questions and then we're probably looking at February or March before we're actually going to start putting it on.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very, in my opinion, detailed, ambitious task, and so we might, and maybe we offline can talk about who out there can help us brainstorm, just putting together what it is we want. And there's the minor detail of what a consultant would do and how we pay for it. We did not build that into the resolution. So we've got to have some conversations around how to make that happen. Okay. So I guess I'll accept motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you.